Hi, folks. Thanks for coming. It's really warm in here, so sorry. So thanks for like hanging out with me. Well, I think it's winter, but I'm not sure. All right. So I'm used to moving around a lot. So if you just see me bopping, that's because like I'm one of those people who can't actually stand still. So I apologize in advance. So who am I? I'm a principal security engineer. I work at a big cloud provider. You've probably heard of them. I actually used to work at a different cloud provider, so I just move around cloud providers, I've decided. That link is not super helpful, I'm realizing, but I did an interview with TLDRSec about what it's like to be a principal engineer in security. So if that's your path, like go check them out. There's maybe 10 or 12 of us who talked about our journeys. I like the security community. So I come out and talk with all you folks, and I actually help run security conferences. How many people are here from Portland area? Okay. How many people are here from Seattle? All right, awesome. So hi, Seattle folks. I'm also from Seattle. I'm one of the organizers of BSides Seattle, so feel free to come up. And if, seriously, we're just as cool, please come up. We'd love to see you. So why this talk? I've worked at a lot of different companies. I've seen the same sort of bad behavior, if you will, and pitfalls that we all run into. And it's kind of funny because you don't even realize you're in them until you're in them and you're like, wait a minute, this feels wildly familiar. So I thought I would do this talk. Normal disclosure, these are my opinions, not my company's. All right, so the first one, technology will solve all the things. I mean, how many people have been pretty excited by all this AI stuff? And do you think it's gonna solve all the things? Right, okay. So my point is we often say, oh, we have this problem. I'm just gonna go get a tech solution. I actually saw a job posting the other day that was it's something about their preferred requirements, and they were the person solves problems with tech, not process. And I was like, oh, wow, I wish them luck. So what does this ignore? It ignores the humans and the processes. I know that's not the sexy stuff. I know we're all really into tech. That's why we work in security. We like technology. But guess what? You gotta deal with the humans and you gotta deal with the processes. You ignore those, your tech solution is pretty fragile. So let's say you find yourself and you've launched some tool, or you've, gonna build some tool, like the XKCD, and you're like, oh no, this isn't working. It's an easy correction, right? Go and look and see okay, well, how does this interact with the humans that need to interact with the tool, and what's the process? But I would say if you're gonna avoid this, don't start with, what's the tool that will solve my problem? Start with, what is my problem? And do your actual root cause analysis. Root cause analysis is this amazing tool that we can use for everything, right? But if we actually use it for solving problems, we'll actually get the right solution versus just the easy solution. Okay. Does anybody know what I mean by NAAS? Anybody want to guess? So what I usually call it is know as a service. And I think security pros are awesome at this. Dev team comes, we built this cool thing, and we look at it and we're like, no. And they're like, okay, but why? And most of our response is just well, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you didn't follow this checklist, you missed this policy, no, 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 no. Okay, but here's the thing. It's a negotiation, right? You want the dev team to push something secure. At least, I really hope you do. They want to push their feature, product, new whiz-bang thing. We just talked about AI. So how do you meet them in the middle? If you've ever studied negotiations, there's something called your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, otherwise known as your BATNA. Know that before you talk to the team. Like, how do you get them to meet you in the middle? So we really can't do no as a service. It's my running joke, like, because I do think we're actually really good at it, by the way. But we can't do that, right? Security is a partnership, unless you work, like, even if you work at a security company. I guess if you work at a security consulting firm, and everybody else around you is just security pros, maybe you won't run into this. But I don't think that's the vast majority of us. The vast majority of us work with, devs, product managers, program managers, marketing. There's so many other things that I'm blanking on at the moment. So just remember, like, this is a partnership, right? Like, go in with that. And, like, you just don't, like, my biggest recommendation is, like, if you're about to say no, just say no, but. And give them an alternative, right? Like, no, you can't release that really awful product. You really can't, have passwords in the clear. How about you do this instead? Like, give them a solution, right? Don't just say no. Because we've got to shift our mindset away from this. And, like, I do want to say that I do think the industry has a bit of a reputation, and a lot of people have a bit of a reputation of being this way. So, like, my call to action is, like, let's be a little better. All right, so how many people have a security review process? Okay, how much of it is self-attested? Like, how much does the dev team just go and do in a hole by themselves? How accurate do you think the thing you get back from them is? Like, this is the problem with self-attestation and checklists. I just don't think they really do a lot of good, right? Like, they're easy. They're wildly easy. And to be honest, if that's all you got, because you're super scrappy and you're a team of like 2 or 3, like, start there. But don't stay there, because we're not going to get the data we need from the dev teams to help them be secure. So my correction, or my avoidance, is automation. It's actually really interesting. Someone was presenting a new proposed program at work. And I was reading through it, and be like, this is weird. Like, where's the automation? Like, there was no reference to it. It was just like, we're gonna have these people fill out this checklist. And I was like, well, I mean, neat, might be helpful, might work, might get us somewhere. But I actually think a lot of it could be automated. And so I would start with, like, what can you automate and what can't you automate? And so, like, that will really help you understand where you have telemetry gaps and where you need to go address those. One of my favorites in security, everything is urgent. Nothing is urgent, by the way, if everything's urgent. Like, it's just not possible. So I actually look at this as the struggle between reactive and proactive security. And so, obviously, if you're in the middle of an incident, focus on that. Like, focus on containment, focus on, your incident response. But for the most part, I think we tend to react versus try to prevent or protect. And I know we've talked, like, in the industry, we talk a lot about shifting left, right? Like, we've got to shift left, which, by the way, if I ever do a talk on expressions I don't like, that's definitely one of them. But I do think, a lot of what we focus on is just like, we're reacting to these constant events. Like, if you're in incident response, you're getting inundated, right? You're getting lots of detections. There's like logging alerts, there's monitoring alerts, there's, alarms going off. Like, how do you actually get proactive? And that's why you need, like, not just incident response. Normally you actually need a full team, but if you don't actually focus on prevention, you're just going to keep reacting. You're going to keep reacting. You're just going to keep reacting. The other thing I think is kind of tied to this is that security people like to focus on threats, vulnerabilities, and issues. Like, it's kind of interesting, right? So what'd you find? Like, you ask somebody, like, what interesting things did you find in the threat model? And they'll tell you all the things. Okay, cool. What are the detections find? And again, they'll tell you all the things. If you have bug bounty, what did bug bounty find? Oh, all the things. But the business doesn't care. that we found vulnerabilities and threats and misconfigurations. They care about risk. And so when we hyper-focus on the things we found versus the risk to the business, we're not actually showing the business why we should be in the room. So that's when I say, like, what security cares about versus what the business cares about. I've come into a lot of security teams, and I've seen that exact behavior over and over again. We're reactive, and we talk about things that no one cares about. Literally, that sounds terrible, but I don't actually think the business cares if you've found 100 cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. They want to know what the impact to the business is. And if you can tell them that, whoa, totally different conversation. Last year I was here talking about shared language and understanding. And so I think this is where it gets really important because, again, we're all security pros, or we want to be security pros, because there might be some people in the audience that aren't in security yet, right? The business is not, they don't understand what you're talking about. Like, I had a VP who once was like, can you guys stop with the inside baseball? I was like, inside baseball? And it took me a minute to figure out what he meant, but we're all talking amongst each other, explaining like what's going on, and he doesn't, you might as well be speaking a foreign language, right? And so we've got to remember that for the most part, we're there to support the business. And so if we don't use language the business understands, they can't really understand the value we provide. They don't understand the value we provide, we can't get headcount, can't get budget, and so on and so forth. So how do we like get around the whole everything is urgent, we're talking about the wrong stuffs? I do think this is a partnership with the business to understand scope, impact, and criticality, right? So if anybody does anybody in this room actually do risk management? Like, okay, we got one person, yay. One of the classic things in risk management is we talk about likelihood, and you'll notice I don't have that. I just don't know what that does for you. Like, there's a lot of incidents that if we reflect back and we'd say, what would we have rated the likelihood of this incident? I think a lot of us in this room would say, not likely, and yet it still happens, right? And so that's why I think you need to understand things like scope and blast radius and impact and be able to tell the business what that looks like. So how do you avoid all this fun shenanigans? I think my biggest thing is be wary of recency bias. If you have shout out to the gentleman who does risk management, like if you have a good risk management program and you say here are your risks, don't change all of them because you just had an incident. Like, be very wary of recency bias. It might actually show you that you've got the right idea, or it might actually put you on the wrong path. And I would say build a risk management program. And this doesn't have to be like, go buy a tool, go buy a bunch of humans. Like, this could be super lightweight. Just document the risks and share it with the business and see if they agree. And if they don't agree, keep having those conversations, right? You want to make sure that you are aligned with the business. Okay. Does anybody know what I mean by OPSEC? Yeah, can you want to like shout it out? No. Does anybody want to shout out what I think OPSEC means?
Operational security.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
What you do for security day to day.
Awesome. Awesome. Like, I wish I had a prize now. See? Dang it. I actually have a friend who talks about bringing prizes to talks, and I'm always like, that's such a great idea. And then I like totally forget about it because I have to drive distances and I always forget. Anyways, I will argue that OPSEC is almost never what we focus on, which is wild to me. Like, we're all security pros, but like, how many of us, do all the proper marking of our emails to say this is a confidential email? I'm gonna go with most of us don't. Or how many of us actually properly ACL a document? So you wrote a document, it's got all the risks. Who all has access to it? Like, the problem is, it's really easy, I think, to do the wrong thing. Like, it's wildly easy, right? So I think standards help here. Even though I'm not a big fan of policy, that should also be in words I don't like. But I do think standards can help here. So if you have a tool that actually will mark this for you, like go ahead and say like, use the tool to mark the thing appropriately. If you don't, just tell people the expectation, right? Like when should you put something in an email? When shouldn't you put something in an email? When should you pick up the phone, right? Like we have to protect the business at the end of the day. And if we don't do this ourselves, the business isn't going to either. So what are my key takeaways? I think you have to reframe how you think about security at the start, right? We shouldn't be reactive. We need to be proactive. We don't want to show up with no as a service. We want to understand what actually is critical and important to the business versus just what we think is. If you find yourself in one of these pitfalls or headed towards one, just stop. Like, it's okay. Take the foot off the gas pedal, or in my case, off the battery pedal, because there's no gas anymore, and correct, right? Like, you don't have to keep going down a bad path. You have the opportunity to make a correction. And then, this might be obvious, but if it's not, security's iterative. We're gonna, like, let's be clear, we're all gonna fall into these pitfalls at one point or another. There is no way any of us are good enough to avoid it. There's just so much momentum in business that you're gonna hit some of these. And be okay with that. I mean, just remember, it's iterative, and we can keep going, and we can correct. And that's all I got, folks. So thanks so much. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I know that was like a very quick tour of all the, I have more pitfalls. For 20 minutes, I just want to pick on the ones I thought were the worst. Yeah, go for it.
So,
yeah. If you can translate it into money, which is kind of what I meant by impact and blast radius, that tends to land well. So like, if we don't fix X, we'll have a total cloud compromise. If we have a total cloud compromise, this is how much business we forecast you would lose. And if you don't know how to forecast that, there's somebody who can help you on that risk management team. Because you explain, like, here's kind of the scope of what I think could happen. What would this cost us? And those folks are dynamite at that. And so that's been my approach, and it seems to work pretty well. And it may not work. Like, this is the one problem. I will warn you. Like, we're always like, oh, we can just automate everything. There's going to be gaps, right? But I do think this is an important point, right? Like, if you have the opportunity to turn on a policy that says you can't send an email unless you rank it, because there's all these rankings in email nowadays, which fascinates me. That makes it easier, right? Or you can't save a Word document or an Excel sheet or a PowerPoint or whatever your jam is without actually saying what is inside of it and why it matters. I would say, like, if you're gonna automate everything, you probably need really good telemetry and really good alarming for something that looks anonymous, which is not easy.
right.
It's kind of the classic trade-off between like security and convenience. And like, let's be clear, we're all security pros, so we're all here to solve hard problems. So I agree, it's a totally hard problem. So maybe you should do a talk on it in the future. Hint, hint, get up on stage. All right, anybody got anything else? If not, I'll let you go eat if that's of interest. All right, thanks folks, really appreciate it.